So welcome to the third video. The idea of this video is to create or start creating a portfolio that's good enough to become a WordPress developer. In this project we'll be creating a machine learning review widget that sells. Specifically in this video we're going to be doing 5 tasks that revolve around the idea of querying that WordPress database for our data. So let's have a quick look at what we'll be making in this project. So in the first video you saw the designs that I did for creating the plugin. In the last video you saw how I could install the plugin. In this video I want to look at what we'll be creating or focusing specifically on this video. So the idea is that these values here, these positivity values, are created by the machine learning code or the model. The same with the quote, so we'll have a full quote and then we'll have a full comment, and then the machine learning algorithm will find out what would be the best kind of quote to summarize the information. So in this video what we'll be doing is we're going to be querying the table that we create to get the data so we can put it on the front end to make our widget that displays this. And later on we will be making interaction features and animation. However, in this video we're going to be specifically looking at querying that data or that database to get this information, the quotation, the full comment, the author, and things like that. So if you watched our last video you should be able to do all of these tasks now. So we're going to be using that WordPress database object to create a SQL query that we'll send to the database. We're going to be using the get result method instead of the get var method that we used last time, because we're not going to get one result, we're going to get multiple results. And importantly, we're going to be querying 2 tables. One table is a table that we'll create, and the other table is the table that that's already existing in the WordPress database, that WP comments table, and then we're going to be cycling through those results and just attaching them onto our array of arrays value that we created in the last video. And then the last 4 or 5 tasks, or task 4 times 5, is to create that dashboard page, that menu page. Again, if you looked at my other videos, you should be able to create this. So stop the video and try and design the code yourself and then see how I would do that. Okay, so this is the code that we made last time. We've initialized the array, so this is the stuff we're going to put the values into. We have created the tables, or the table name, the column name. So even though we haven't created that table yet, we have the information that we're going to be using to create that table, and so this is the stuff we're going to be querying from. So the first thing that we need to do is we need to decide where we're going to put our query code in. So instead of putting it in the constructor, I'm going to be doing the same thing as I did last video and making a new method, for our code. So I'm going to be creating a get data method, and because we want to query the WordPress database, we're going to be initializing that WordPress database. The reason why we have to do it is because we initialized this within the scope of this method, and so we're going to be doing it the same. We're going to be initializing this so it can be accessed within the scope of the method. And so what we need to do next is we need to create our statement. So we're going to be using a prepared method. Now remember from the last video, this prepared method allows us to safely prepare a SQL query when we allow the user to put in some data. So for example, this is our our query here. This is the SQL query, and then this is the variable that we want to place in here, and now this is the placeholder. So for example, at the moment we have this variable, but it's not connected to anything. So what I'm going to be doing is I'm going to be initializing a new variable, and I'm calling it threshold, and I'm going to be setting it to 0.88. So this should match up to that. So what this means is that if we look back at that WordPress plugin, at localhost, we're going to be saying, well, we only want values that are greater than 0.88, or let's say 0.78. So we're going to make a plugin that can easily change that value later on. If we look here, this is the placeholder. At the moment it's a string because it's got that S. Now that's not a string, and so that's a mistake. That's a float, so we're going to put that as F. If it was just our whole number, we could put that as a D digit, but we're just going to put that as an F there. So we have prepared our query. Now we're going to be using the method, the getResults method, to query our database. So remember, we've already done that SQL query. It's saying I want to get these tables, or these columns here, column in the select section, from this table where this column is greater than this number, and I want you to order it by the positive values in descending order, so it'll be the highest to the lowest. Okay, and then I'm going to put that query, and I'm saying query that into our database. So we have just now created we've created a query, and we've now sent that query to the database. The issue at the moment is that this quote here and this positivity number here, this is in a table that we will create. However, the actual full quote here, this will be in the WordPress comment table. So at the moment, the information that we want, or the information that we've queried, isn't the full amount. So we have, for example, the quotation that we're going to use as the title, but we don't have the author, and we don't have the full comment yet. So we need to change that array so that it contains all of that information, so we can pass it through to our JavaScript. So we need to cycle through the results of this value to get that information. So what we're going to say is for each row in the all row results method that's been returned, what we want to do is we want to query that WordPress document table. So we're going to say, look, select all the columns from the WordPress table where the column ID matches the comment ID. Okay, so remember, if we want to get column names from this, we can say get the column name, so arrow it and then common name, or the column name. So for example, if we wanted to get quote, we would say row arrow quote. If we want to get that positive one, because remember these are going to be the column names, we're going to say row arrow positive. So that's how we get the column names from our get result array And do remember, we will need to cycle through to get that. If we just put all rows arrow, it won't work. We'll have to cycle through each row to get that information. So we get that query, or we create that query, and we haven't used that prepare because we're not going to be allowing the user to put any information in it. And then from that query, we're going to query, or from that SQL statement, we're going to query the database using getRow, because we're only going to get one row. So we're going to get multiple values, but we're only going to get one value, or one row from that database. And then what I'm going to say is I'm going to say, look, we need now to put all of this into an array. So I'm going to say, let's make an array, and that array has a number, because we want to say we can then put it on order, but that means that we will have to create a number before it. So we say the first value here is just going to be the number that kind of increments, so we're able to kind of order the records. Then I'm going to put an all-day author, and I'm going to say I'm going to get that from the query that we did in within the for each loop. So I'm going to say, look, get that common author. If you are unsure about what table names we have, you can go into your WordPress tables, or you can search it online. So if I go into my PHP My Admin and I click on my WordPress tables, we can look at what tables are available. I'm going to be dealing with the WordPress comments tables. So we click on that and you can just see the comments and all the columns names. So we are going to be dealing with common author. I'm going to be taking that, and we're going to be dealing with common content. So you just need to remember that these are the column names that I'll be using. You can search the all the columns just on a simple Google search, because they are the standard WordPress tables. So I will steal the column author from that query that I made here, and because it's a get row, I can just do the same thing with that arrow comment, or that arrow there. I can say, look, I want the column name, and because it's get row, I can do that. Where get result, I'm not able to do that without cycling through a for each. So I do the column author and then get the comment content column from that query. I then go to the comment approved to find out how many likes there are. I then go back to the row and I say I want that quote, and then I go back to the row there and I say I want that positive number there. And so I have all this data, but because I'm going to be cycling through each record that I get from this result, it's going to happen more than once. So what I would like is I'm going to then put this array within another array, and that array is being stored up here, so I can call from it elsewhere. So what this does then is, after this cycle, I will have all the records that are above the threshold, which is 0.87, and then from each of those records I'm going to take the common author, the common content, the likes, the quotes, the positive number, and I'm going to put them all into this array of arrays. So then I can pass that into my JavaScript code, and that will be all the information. So I have now created an array of arrays with the values from the two queries we've created. What I am going to do though is I'm going to tidy it up somewhat, because let's say nothing is returned here. Let's say that if there are no results, that is null. So if it's null, we don't actually want to cycle through this. We just want to ignore this. So if it's null, we can say there you go. If this is not null, we're going to do this. If this is null, we're just going to ignore all of this. So if we do it like that, that should tidy it up a little bit. Okay, so that should be our method to get that data. And so now what we need to do is we need to go on and create actions for creating our menu page, and then use that add menu page function to make that menu page. So that's what we're going to be doing now. Actually, before we go on to that, let's have a think about where we can call this method. So we don't want to call this method unless the check table, unless there's a table that we can check. So we want to make sure that it's after this method. This means that we potentially could call it within this method and say do this method first and then get the data, or we could add it in the constructor with an if. So we could say maybe, well, if this table alert equals false, which means there is a table, then we call this method. I'm going to keep it like that for now, but it's up to you where you want to put that that calling function. Okay, so now that we've actually called that, let's move on to that adding that menu dashboard. I'm going to go through this quite quickly because I've done this in all of my videos. To add a menu bar or a menu, or to add almost anything to WordPress, you need to know what actions are, hooks are, filters are. If you haven't, check out that video where I explain what they are. What I'm going to be doing is, instead of putting all my actions in the constructor, where I've done that in other videos, I'm going to create a new method within that, and I'm just saying I want you to add this action to the add menu hook, and then within that constructor I'm going to just call that method there. So that method, so what I can do then is add, if I ever want to add a new action, I'm just going to add it into that all action method, and then I can keep my constructor a little clean. And then the only thing that I need to do now is create that my menu page method that links up or hooks up to that hook. So I'm going to put that, because it's M, I'm going to put that down there, and then I use the add menu page WordPress function to add that dashboard on there. If you don't know how this works, if you don't understand what these are, I suggest looking through my WordPress fundamental playlist, and it'll explain it. So all we need to do there is to create that template, we need to create another method that says add template, and then put all our code that makes the template for our dashboard. So I think we have now added the actions for creating a menu, and we've added the menu page. Do remember, if you are confused a little bit about this and why I've gone through it so quickly, it's because I have done this a few times. Do check out the other playlists, especially that WordPress fundamental playlist, if you're not sure what I've done or why I've done that. Okay, so that should be all of the code. We've added our constructor. Our constructor first checks the table. Then, if the table is found, it will get the data, and what this does is it queries our table the table that we will create, and it gets all the values from there, but only if the values are over that threshold limit. Then what I do is I make sure that if those values have returned something, we cycle through all the values, all the records, all the rows, because we got that get result. And then for each row, I then make another query using that arrow and that comment ID. So do remember, it's not the variable stored in our class, it is the column stored in the table. So that has to match up with the actual value that we've stored up there. And so what I do then is I get that information. Potentially, if you're going to sell it, you probably have to create some kind of error handling method here or code here to make sure that if there is nothing returned here, an error forms. I haven't done that. All I've done is I've queried the information, I've created an array, and I've said, look, from that array, store that number, and then store the comment author that is located in this query, store the comment content. Again, this is the column that is from the WordPress comment database or table, and then I've added it into this array, and then I've added that array onto our main array. So this array will have multiple arrays in it, and each array will store all the information that we need for one of our comments that we'll display on the front end. And then very quickly I've just added our menu page to the plugin. So let's have a quick look at the concept checking questions. Pause the video, see if you can answer them. I know there's been a lot of information thrown at you. Let's see what you can remember. Okay, so the D and S meaning that prepared, do remember it's a placeholder. So if you see an S here, that means that this placeholder expects a string. If you see a D, it expects a digit. If you see an F, I think it expects a float. And this is the variable that we'll insert in there. How do you display the information from the get result method? Well, first you need to cycle through each of the rows that you have got from that get result method, and then you use this arrow to kind of look at the column name. Remember, it's not any variables that you've stored in your PHP or in your class. It's that column name in the database or in the table. What is the difference between get value, or actually get var? That should be get var versus get result. Get result is all the results in the table. Get var is that one. So remember that the one that we did before when we prepared this one, we only wanted one result, so we used that get var. What are the steps to creating a menu page in the admin dashboard? So remember, we first have to add that action, and we have to hook it to that add menu. Then we have to create the method that we're going to store the actual add menu page function. So we add this to this, and then we use this function here to create our menu page. And then we use this array here to store another method in our class, and that will have the actual template there where we can design the look of our page. Do remember, if you were confused about that, do look at my plugin or my playlist for WordPress fundamentals, and it does explain what each of them are. So thank you for watching the video. Hopefully you've understand why I've put an array of arrays. So what I don't want is, I don't want my JavaScript, every time the user clicks on something, it queries the database. I don't want that. I want all the information to be done at the front end or at the back end when it's all been initialized. And then I want to send all that information to my JavaScript. And so that means that every time every time the user clicks on the button, there is a much quicker response. There is not a request to the server. So that is why I've added that array of arrays. So now that I have this one array, a 2D array as it were, I can then put that into a JSON file and I can send that across to my JavaScript, and then my JavaScript has all the information that it can quickly cycle through. So I hope you've understood why I've done that, and I hope now you are able to create queries in WordPress. You are hopefully able now to create get row, get result, and get var, and you understand how that prepare method works. If you're interested in looking about more animational stuff, I've done 2 animational ones, a Valentine's Day plugin and a Matrix animational plugin. If you are interested in learning more about this, every Friday I'm going to try and release a video. Please subscribe if you're interested in learning more about it. Leave a comment or a like to know, to tell me if you're enjoying it. Thank you very much, and see you next week.